about shame, shame, shame. It's the name of her game. There's so much to do, and we're gonna speak true. So many to blame.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to everybody out there in podcast land. You might have noticed that things are looking a little bit different today. We are broadcasting from the Awakenings Gallery in Chicago, Illinois, a gallery that's run by an organization called, wait for it, Awakenings, whose mission is to make visible the creative expression, artistic expression of survivors of sexual assault. So this is like the event space, this is the office space, this is the gallery space. Everything you see on this wall here was created by a survivor of sexual trauma of one kind or another. And we're here for a couple of reasons. Many things have changed for us in the last month or two. We are working under the fiscal sponsorship of Awakenings, which means everybody out there who is just dying to support us with their hard-earned bucks now has an avenue by which they can do that, and it will be tax deductible. Derek is going to talk to you more about that later. I feel like I am home again with all that implies, because I was the founder of Awakenings in 2011. The organization has gone through a number of changes over the years, most importantly of which I am no longer running it, but it is very good to come home again. I look at the walls and I see old friends. I knew most of these artists personally. I listened to their stories. I worked with them. I had the great good fortune of finding Laura Kinter, who is currently the executive director.
Shout out to Laura.
Oh, big shout out to Laura. Not here today, but she'll be joining us sometime in the future. But Laura started working for Awakenings 10 hours a week, and now she's the ED, which will tell you a little bit about Laura. I don't know, Derek. What else do you want to? What do you want to say?
And by the way, who founded Awakenings?
Oh, I did. Didn't I say that? In my spare time, between books. Notice how cleverly I
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think today we're going to take a little bit different track than our normal episodes, and we're going to talk about us.
Yeah, and I guess we should mention that Tom is not here today, though you alert people out there might have already noticed that, but Tom is, as usual, has a maniacal schedule, and I think he's going to be here in July. But this was a tough time for him. Also, too, Derek and I have been working very hard over the past month or two, setting up the new infrastructure, making arrangements with Laura to get Awakenings acting as our fiscal sponsor, recruiting, figuring out how to put together visual content for subscriptions. Derek is working hard to find corporate sponsors. I was just trying to sit and guide everybody through the process without going crazy. I have already spent enough of my life setting up nonprofits and really didn't want to do it again. So once again, thank God for Laura, because she stepped in and offered to be our fiscal sponsor, and I don't think the fit could have been better.
Right. And before we jump in and start talking about our books, I just wanted to mention to everybody out there in internet land and podcast land that soon, Shame on You will be on every single social media platform, every podcast platform, and our website will be up and running. We're going to launch our subscription program, and so people will be able to support us further in our mission and what we're doing. So you'll be on the lookout for that. And
yeah, you lucky subscribers are going to get stuff that regular listeners don't get.
Mm-hmm. You may or may not have the winning lottery numbers, or
we're going to do everything we can to keep you interested, engaged, and focused on the same things we're focused on, which is creating a greater sense of awareness about the shocking levels of childhood sexual abuse in our country, which is kind of, what our books are about, too. So, hey, Gene, good transition.
Yeah. I think it's cool. I think maybe we should just go down the line. We have Dear Judith, then we'll do my book, then we'll do heavy metal.
Well, that's kind of chronological, I think.
Right.
So that makes sense. Yeah, well, Derek and I are here, in addition to all the other things Derek does, he is a writer and an author. In addition to all the other things that I do, I am essentially a writer and an author. And I tried to retire, and Derek completely blew my plans for that, because I am writing again. I did revisit, I kind of gave up on selling my books, and for a lot of reasons that I'm sure Derek's going to ask me about. But it's because of Derek that these books are sitting here today, because he persuaded me that there was still an audience for them. I had just never been able to take advantage of the right tools. Well, it was like almost 20 years ago. The tools didn't exist. So
www.genecozier.com.
Is that what it is? That's not what it is it?
Yeah, genecozier.com.
I thought it was like J. Cozier author.
That's your Instagram handle.
Well, that sounds much classier. Oh, well. Oh, well, it's been my name for a long time. I can't change it now.
So I'm going to start with a big question.
Okay.
Who was Judith?
Judith was my first cousin. She and I are from a family with a long history of dysfunction, as to put it mildly. We've got alcoholics. We've got domestic violence. We've got sexual abuse. We've got just general orneriness. My mother was one of 5 children, and Judith was the daughter of my mother's older brother, the man she always said was her favorite brother. And I had met Judith once. They were in California, and we were in Indiana, and we didn't fly much in those days. And I met her her and her younger sister, Jill, I met them when I was about 12. My mother and I were making a trip to Phoenix, I believe, to see an old friend of hers. And I think we jumped on some kind of small plane and flew over to San Diego, which is where Judith and her family were living. And I remember them. They were teenagers, and I was an awkward 12-year-old. But, and my mother would mention them, of course, but that was really it. Until a very strange day when I was, I think, in my mid-30s. I could look at the book and give you the exact date, but Judith wrote a letter. At that time, Judith was involved in NA, Narcotics Anonymous, and as those of you who might be familiar with 12-step programs know, reaching out and connecting to family is many times part of the recovery process. So Judith wrote to my mother and said, who were the alcoholics in our family, Aunt Lucy? Oh, my mom was terribly, terribly upset by this. And I was home on a visit, and she passed me the letter, and she says, read this, because I don't know what to do with it. So I read it, and I just said, well, Mom, Judith doesn't know anything about her family. She's asking some questions. Well, there's no alcoholics in our family. Oh, yeah, right, Mom. So I just said, give it to me. I'll take care of the whole thing. You'll never have to think about it again. So Judith and I began corresponding, and I told her all about the alcoholics in our family. Mm-hmm. And the weird thing was, at the time, neither one of us was aware that we had been sexually violated as children. I have always thought that our association, our friendship, our closeness, because we bonded instantly. We were sisters almost overnight. And I've always thought that process hastened the whole memory retrieval process for her, and then later for me as well, because that was a huge part of our relationship. We shared that. We exchanged letters almost daily at some times, certainly weekly most of the time, at least until Judith got farther down, farther toward healing. And she became the most important person in my life. Yes, Ernie, my husband.
Hey, Ernie.
I loved her in a way that I've never loved anybody else, and I think it's because she loved me. I've had a lot of people love me. I've had a lot of people claim that they love me. I have never really been convinced. I have a hard time separating, people who are able to love me for me and people who love me because of what I do for them, or because of my achievements, or whatever. But it's always been hard for me to really feel loved as a person, as a human being. I don't feel that I got much of that growing up, and I got it instantly from Judith. I was the family she'd been looking for. I was the sister that, for a number of reasons, her sister could not be at that time, although they eventually did a lot of healing in their relationship too. So Judith was the most important person in my life until I lost her.
Yes. in Dear Judith, the whole format of the book is letters,
Right.
correspondence, and then you have some time skips, which I'm a big fan of the time skips in the post.
Time skips?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You and I both do that in our writing.
Yeah.
We were into multiple timelines way before Netflix.
Exactly. And you have alternate universes and dimensions.
Yeah. Way before Netflix and way before that got trendy. You and I were doing that.
So obviously, you and Judith started talking about your experiences being sexually abused before it became a book.
Yes.
And you were corresponding in letters. One of the things I know for me was the first times I started writing about my experiences being sexually abused, it was tough, but for me, it was like a necessary part of my healing. What was that like for you?
Well, the healing, of course, was tough. She started working with her memories and going through her stuff, I would say maybe about 3 years before I did. Mm-hmm. So she was there for me. Writing about, when I wasn't writing about my abuse when I wrote this book. I was just going back and, kind of like publishing the letters. Mm-hmm. A lot of editing, of course. But I was writing, when I wrote the book, I was writing about Judith. Mm-hmm. I was not really writing about myself. I mean, that writing had been done already. Yeah. I didn't start the book until 8 years after her death. So a lot of I had already by that time gotten used to writing about what had happened to me. I'm trying to remember. I started recovering my memories of the whole thing around my very late 30s, and when I was my 40th birthday was a big turning point with a lot of that stuff. And it was kind of a couple years after that. So let's say I wasn't speaking openly, publicly at events, not even that much to friends, until I was in almost my mid-40s. Mm-hmm. So let's see, that would have been like 1940 in 1994. Yeah, so it was the late 90s before I really kind of came out and felt comfortable talking about it. Mm-hmm. I was in therapy. I talked to Ernie about it. I talked to one or two of my close girlfriends, but not that many. It was easier to talk to strangers. I was probably already doing speeches at the Zacharias Center, but talking to a room full of strangers was easier than talking to people who knew me. I remember something that a theme in my writing at that time was, once I tell somebody that this has happened to me, I stop being myself and I become a victim. People relate to me differently. People see me differently. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that.
What do you mean by that?
I just could sense a difference. All of a sudden it's like, poor you. Oh my God, really?
Right.
Poor you. And it's like, you've known me for 30 years. Mm-hmm. I'm still Jean. Right. I'm not different. The whole process of trying to get a grip on what had happened to me, the word that therapists use a lot is ungrounding. Mm-hmm. It was incredibly ungrounding. I was in my early 40s, and I'm suddenly looking back at a life that I'd lived for 40 years, and it's like, none of it was what I thought it was. Mm-hmm. If I was wrong about this, if this was so different from what I remember, what the fuck else is real? What the fuck, what's real and what isn't? Yeah. That's the word they use, ungrounding. And that's why it was so much easier for me to talk to entire rooms full of strangers than it was to tell some of my best friends. I spoke about this once at the Zacharias Center. I spoke to my high school friend, Mary Ann. She was visiting me in Chicago, and at that time, it was before Awakenings, of course, I was starting to collect some of this artwork, and I was hanging it up all over my house. Most of it was in the basement, though. I had my working offices in the basement for a long, long time, and I hung all my art down there, and I can just remember Mary Ann coming down the stairs, and she stopped in the middle of the staircase, and she started crying. Mary Ann was not a crier. Mary Ann has had a tough life. And I was going like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she said, all those years and you never told me. And I said, I wasn't telling anybody. I wasn't telling anybody. I always remember because, oh my God, what had happened to me had made my friend Marianne cry. And nothing made Marianne cry. So that was just one of those moments that you remember. I was glad she knew. I was glad I had told her. But still, when you're telling something like this 40 years later to somebody you've known since you were 10 years old, it's not easy. And, and then, of course, they know the cast of characters. It was like, well, who was it? Good God, was it your stepfather? No, it wasn't my stepfather. Well, who was it? And these were people who knew the person. That's probably why it's easier to talk to strangers, too. If I tell people I grew up with, they know who I'm talking about.
Yeah. I remember when I started working with Alan on Childhood Fractured, and when I met you, right? When I met you, we did the first book that we wrote, like we basically started in this room. And I could go up to any stranger and tell them everything about myself. I could tell them the nitty-gritty details of my abuse. But then I start talking to people I grew up with.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, Derek, what have you been up to? I'm like, well, how much time do you have?
Oh, yeah. You always wonder how much time people are going to give you.
Yeah, right.
It was like that with cancer, too. Gene, are you all over cancer? How much time have you got? Do you really want an answer to that?
Yeah.
I don't think so. You're looking at your watch already, aren't you? Yeah. No. Now they look at their phones.
Right, exactly. They're like, oh, yeah, I got about 5 minutes.
Yeah, can I check my Instagram while you're telling me that?
Telling me the worst parts of your life. So for Dear Judith, you've been corresponding with Judith. You reconnected later in life. You had this amazing series of letters, and I love your guys' humor. There's a sense of humor throughout the whole thing.
She was funny.
And so when did you decide to turn these letters into that?
I always said I was never going to write a book. I was a professional writer. I worked in Chicago's film and video production community for about 25, 30 years. I didn't like the idea of writing a book. I liked short pieces. I liked visual pieces. A book just seemed very, very daunting to me. I don't even really remember coming right to the decision. I know I was in group therapy at the time, and I think I just started telling people that I was going to write a book about my cousin Judith. Maybe I was just throwing up a trial balloon, but I knew I had all the letters. I knew I had all the letters somewhere. The written letters from her. I'm trying to think. I guess all the letters I got from her were paper. We didn't start, we never, at one point she decided she was going to be using a modem. Does anybody remember modems? I always wrote to her on the computer, but then I printed them out and mailed them. And her husband was into computers, so I guess at some point, yes, she was typing them on the computer and mailing them too. So I'm sorry, what was the original? I had hard copies, and I knew that the discs were somewhere. And this is back in the day. Does anybody remember? This is even before the little cassette discs. This is like the big floppy discs. And I just really dreaded having to go find those and look at them again. And I remember I decided to go away for about a week. I'd found a place in Michigan that I wanted to rent. And I just, grabbed a whole bunch of crap out of my basement and took it all with me. And I remember I was sitting in that, I thought I was renting a cabin. It turned out to be a trailer. I remember I was sitting there in the trailer and I looked and they were all in order. They were sorted by date. It was like, the part of the job that I had been dreading, it was already done, and I had absolutely no memory of having done it, none whatsoever.
That just speaks to your organizational subconscious.
Well, it means that I did it in my sleep? I don't know. I don't know. I have actually written in my sleep. Nothing any good.
For those of you that don't know, Jean's the most organized writer ever.
I go crazy if my stuff isn't organized. Oh, I can't. I don't, this idea that creativity and messiness go together, that's just like the biggest pile of crap I've ever heard in my life. I can't even start if I don't know where everything is. You went through that the other day when you asked me where those photos were and I couldn't find them.
Well,
I found them in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
I was like, shit, they're not where I thought they were. Oh, Derek's going to think I'm an idiot. So it was all done. And I remember I was able to start right away. And I remember then shortly after that, I think Ernie was on a business trip in California and I went with him and we were in the most lovely, lovely resort hotel in Laguna Niguel. Oh Lord, it was beautiful. And I just, I sat by the beach and I did some writing and then I did some more. And I guess I can't remember which came first, California or Michigan. I just remember it was in Michigan where I went through all those files and there they were all organized for me. So getting started turned out to be not that difficult. And then, of course, I went at it like a crazy person. I wrote the entire first draft of the book in 6 months. And I went through all those letters, editing and rewriting and editing and rewriting and editing. And I never did find all the letters I'd written to her, which makes me a little bit sad, but I'm pretty sure I had everything she ever wrote to me. At one point in our correspondence, Judith decided to write a book, and I was trying to work as her editor, so that was a nightmare. That was a nightmare, but I didn't decide to write that book about her until 8 years later. And then when I did it hard and I did it fast.
You're sitting here in Awakenings. I think about, it's all inspired, survivor art. And I know that your book, Dear Judith, is not explicitly about sexual abuse. It's for me, it's more about your guys' relationship. And that's like one of the, that type of trauma is like one of the undertones. What role do you think art writing plays for survivors? Because you're like, I don't know anybody who's done more for survivors in the arts than you have. Not even in Chicago, just in the world. So you're like kind of the godmother of the whole idea. What do you like? What's your thoughts?
I don't think I've ever met a survivor who didn't do some writing, and I've met a lot of them.
Yeah.
Journaling, writing. I mean, obviously, many of them, as you can tell looking around here, do art as well, probably for the same purposes. But to me, I've been lucky enough to be blessed with a natural ability to write. My husband says, you don't think about writing. Writing is like breathing to you.
Yeah.
And that pretty much is true. So writing comes easily to me. Healing does not. So it's like constantly trying to cross a bridge. And I knew in the early days, it came in real handy that I could write about Judith. Every once in a while, it would dawn on me I was writing about Judith because it was so much easier than writing about myself. I don't know why it works. I don't know how it works. I've had years of therapy, and I'm a very articulate person, believe it or not. And I can't tell you how or why it works. I only know that it works. A lot of times, if I'm writing the kind of piece that I consider to be my own version of talk therapy, if it's something where I'm processing, I just sit down and start, and I don't know where I'm going. And in the middle, I usually get kind of a sense of what the ending is going to be and what I'm working toward, 2 pages from now where I'll be. And I always get there, and I'm finding that this is happening more and more often to me now. I'm surprised. I think I used to be more structured in my writing. I think I always knew how I was going to start. I always knew what the ending was going to be. I'd flounder in the middle. This is like, anytime you write a trilogy, if you read The Lord of the Rings, it's like, oh my God, that second book, The Two Towers, why am I even bothering? It's middles. I have a problem with middles. But as my writing, I guess, has evolved, I find myself surprising myself more and more, and that is healing. I'll look at that and I'll go, well, I just learned something about myself. I also find myself learning about my writing because I'm sharing it. I belong to a group of writers now, and I'm sharing it. and people's reactions sometimes really surprise me. So you don't really learn enough about your writing if you keep it all locked away in a journal or in a drawer somewhere. You have to be bold, and you have to share it, because that's the only way you learn. It's like anything else when it comes to healing. It doesn't happen in silence. You got to speak the fuck up.
Yeah.
You got to grab people by whatever you can reach.
Yeah.
Ear, hair, nose, whatever. Listen to me, goddammit. I need to talk.
Yep. Yeah.
And you're just going to sit here and listen. It won't frickin' kill you.
Yeah.
You know? No one died of listening to me yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
When I first started writing about child sexual abuse, when I first started working on Childhood Fractured, and I would be, most of the time, you know me, I'm high energy. You're like, you need to drink less coffee, dude. I'm just high strung 24/7, you know. And then when it come to talking to people about, I wouldn't even be talking about my own abuse. I'd just be talking about the topic in general, and I'd be like, all of a sudden I'd tone down. I'd be really meek, and I'm like, yeah, so this is what I wrote a book about. And then over time, I'm just very in your face with it. I remember I was at a dinner party, and and it's everybody's all fancy and everything's all cool, and everybody's like talking about the stock market or whatever. And then somebody asked me, so like, what was you? I know you wrote a book. What was your book about? And I was just like, it was about child sexual abuse. And then the whole table was like,
Yep. Hush. Big hush. Big hush.
no, you can't talk about that. But you're definitely right with that. And the longer that I've worked on this mission, the more involved I've been, the more I've noticed you just have to like get right in fucking people's faces.
Yeah,
just tell
you do.
them like, this is what it is. You don't have to feel bad. There doesn't need to be a dark cloud in the conversation.
I'm not expecting you to do anything.
Yeah.
Except just listen for a minute or
Yeah.
two. Grow some awareness that, and I, I mean, you and I met at Awakening. You and I met
In
right
this room.
here.
And
yeah,
right behind that wall.
Yeah, we met at Awakenings.
Yeah.
I could not figure you out. I knew you were a writer. I mean, I read some of the stuff that you wrote. You and Alan were collaborating on that series of paintings.
Yes.
And Liz, who was working for Awakenings at the time, she found you because we were trying to like reimagine a program that we'd been working here for a while. Where we made financial awards to people to create healing art. And, I just remember we were trying to find some people who would, if we worked it right, it could be mutually beneficial. People could create art in some form or another, and it would be on display at Awakenings in the gallery, or it would be part of an event. And I just remember Liz found about you and your project, and she was like, these two guys are already kind of doing exactly what we're doing. And gosh, I don't think, and then I remember we went out and talked. I remember we went to lunch and talked about it, but I don't think you guys were there. But we did, at that time, we thought you guys were going to like jumpstart this new program, and we were like, this is perfect. They're working on this series of paintings. One of them's an artist, one of them's a writer. One of them will paint, the other one will talk about it. It's going to be a book. We'll have the book at the gallery. I mean, it just seemed like the perfect partnership.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we killed ourselves then trying to create an event around the paintings every month.
That was emotional torture. It was like emotional waterboarding.
It was torture for all of us.
Yeah.
It was so hard. They were probably the most successful events that we had done at the time. You and Alan pulled in more of an audience than we had ever been able to do on our own. But, so I was familiar with your writing, and I knew instantly it was good. I really, it really woke up something in me. I felt a real kinship with you. It was kind of like, he writes the way I do, although I remember thinking, but he's better.
Please.
You have a real way of description. Oh my God. You do like these long descriptive passages, and it's poetry, it's music, it's
yours is music.
But when you write description like nobody else, and then of course you were doing that same trick I was doing, where you were writing, you were writing as as who you are today. And then you were writing about yourself in the past at the same time. You were doing like that dual narrative thing. It's Yellow Jackets. Come on, people. Do you watch Yellow Jackets? Derek and I were doing it years ago. So I just thought, I just didn't know what to make of either one of you. Your hair was so goofy looking there.
Oh, come on. It was cool.
And
I had a big mohawk.
You were just like this tall, skinny person. And I remember thinking, oh my God, he and Laura would be perfect for each other. Maybe they'll date.
To make that match.
I'd have dated you myself, Eric. Derek, if I weren't older than your grandmother. Although we've talked about that. We've decided I'm not actually older than your grandmother.
She was older.
But, I couldn't date you. So it was just... I learned that you guys were working on a book. And by that time, I think I'd kind of already given up that Dear Judith was going to ever do anything in terms of sales, mainly because I don't like selling my own work. I'm a good
That's why I'm here.
I'm a good marketer if somebody else gets me through the door. But I don't like cold calling. I don't like getting in the door. And by that time, too, I'd founded Awakening. So, I just... but I was really determined that your book was going to be different. I was going to, even though that program that we were trying to create around you guys didn't work out for a number of reasons, I was really determined that your book was going to see the light of day, and I was going to do whatever it took to make that happen.
Well, thank you for the kind words. What you were talking, I was thinking about just that whole saga from when we went to here, and then we moved down the street, and one of the things I was thinking about, like as you were talking about your process, at least with healing, when you're writing Dear Judith after the fact, and you were in therapy, and it's like I went to therapy twice. I really, from a young age, I really think art saved my life because I was such a jacked up kid. I was so messed up, and the one thing that like centered me in all the madness was writing. It was drawing, it was reading, and I feel like a lot of kids that have, early childhood trauma or that are sexually abused or have really terrible households, it's like, there's a reason, like not all, but there's a reason that you see like a lot of your favorite actors, your favorite artists, your favorite, et cetera, like it's very rare that they come from like a very well-adjusted two-parent household. Nobody was a drunk. Nobody was a drug addict. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost stereotypical. But yeah, it was the writing that really, for me, was the biggest healing process. It was after the fact. And then it was once I felt more comfortable talking to people about what I'm doing. And then I'd have people I grew up with that have face tattoos telling me, like, messaging me on Facebook, like, yo, I heard about what you were doing. Like, that happened to me too when I was 8. And then they would tell me, they would write, they didn't use really good punctuation, but then they would write.
Do you know anybody who does other than you and me?
They would just write big, long things to me about, they tell me their whole story, what happened, what they're going through, how they want to make a change, how they want to, get on the right track, and et cetera. And that for me was the most healing and gratifying process of writing about this.
But when you were young and you were writing, was it always, a creative outlet, or did you have professional expectations of that was your path in life?
When I was I think I probably did it about like 15, 16 years old. Before that, it was just like, I'm sure you could relate to this. Like, it just was like a twitch. It was like an itch I had to scratch. I just had to have a pen. I had to have a paper. I just had to get my thoughts out. And it wasn't until maybe 15, 16 years old that I was like, you know what? I could fucking do this.
Yeah. Well, no, it actually wasn't that way for me.
Oh.
I don't even remember deciding to be a writer. Everybody just told me I was going to be a writer.
Right.
So to me, it was always professional. It was my road out. It seemed like the only thing that I was good at that hopefully I could make a career out of, because I had to get out of my childhood home. I had to get away from all the pain, the crap, the anger, the violence, the meanness. Neither of my parents was much of a drinker, but
Right.
It was, my stepfather beat on me a few times, but mostly it was emotional and mental abuse. And I got to watch him just treat my mother like dirt. and treat me like dirt. And we oh God, we're fighting all the time. So to me, I mean, I never had the luxury of enjoying writing or finding it healing. It was just like, it was what I did, and it was going to have to be, it was just going to have to do it, man, because I didn't know what other options I had. I was kind of interested in theater, but I was smart enough in those days to know I wasn't going to be a working actress. Might have fantasized about it but once or twice, but no,
That was a college graduation picture. I don't know.
Well, it's not about looks, it's not about talent, it's not even about hard work. It's about all those things and then the right set of lucky breaks.
Yeah.
And I just never thought I could make anything like that happen. And I didn't think I had the strength to, go through the process of waiting for those breaks to happen. So no, writing to me was always about creating a profession that was going to be my ticket out of what I was living in. I didn't start to think of it as healing until probably I was working on Dear Judith. Or maybe there were things that I wrote as part of, you said you went to therapy twice. I went to therapy for like 30 years. I honestly really don't remember doing much writing about healing and sexual abuse until Awakenings, when I had to start, I was a one-woman show for a while, and I had to, create all of our messaging, all of our PR, all of our everything.
Yeah.
And of course, it was about, it was part personal testimony and part, using the skills that I'd gained over the years. But I don't know. It would be interesting to look back on my life and think that writing had been a choice.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause I don't think it ever was.
No, I'm the exact same way. It was never a choice. I was destined to have a pen. This is something I just thought about as you were talking. I know who you are. You know who I am. You know what our mission is. Tom, I don't know how Tom.
Is Tom a writer?
Yeah, no.
Has he ever written anything?
He probably writes 40,000 emails a day. Tom's not somebody that was personally affected by this, but he's involved. And we're building this super team, right? What role with child sexual abuse, what role do you think good writing is going to play in changing public opinion?
I keep waiting for that ultimate perfect campaign.
Yeah.
And I can even envision it. I know what it should be. The right PSA, do people still say it? PSA, public service announcement. The right campaign has done incredible things. I don't know. I think that the public gets worn out very easily on subjects like this. I think that the public very much gets worn out with celebrity stories. At some point, it's going to have to be done the right way.
Yes.
And then there's going to be a crying need for talent. And I hope I'm still around to see it happen. Nothing really happens without the right words, the right images, the right narrative. I don't know. I've given up thinking that I personally am going to make a difference with that, but you never know.
Well,
if I could have predicted any part of my life, I would have run the other way. So in the past 5 years, the past 5 years just continue to astonish me. What the new traumas, the things that I've learned, what I am able to build out of it. The hardest thing about surviving cancer treatment is hard as the treatment is, it's the couple years afterwards that we struggle with, because we know that we've changed as people, but we just don't know how. And I think this has been a recurring theme in my life. Every time there's trauma or something, I go, this is going to change me. And I kind of like who I am now. What am I going to change into? And I think one of the things that is starting to make my life really cool right now is I see myself changing, and it's not bad. It's not bad. I didn't think that some of the avenues, some of the roads I'm taking now would ever be open to me again. And it's interesting, Cancer forced me to, lose what looks I had and then try to put them back together, which has been an interesting process. I will never stop being a sexual abuse survivor and speaking about it. And one of the hardest things about having cancer was because it was so re-triggering. It was like, haven't I already been through this once? Don't I already know, that when I talk, people get a glazed look on their face and change the subject or look at their watch or or phone or remember something else that they have to do? Why do I have to go through this again in my 60s after all that I've already gone through? But I always had a faint hope that out of it, not that I'd learn. I'm sick of learning things. Life, don't teach me any more lessons. I'm tired of them. But, you can take control of change and you can make it work for you. I'm blessed with a lot of resources in spite of the fact that, a lot of my life has sucked. I have a wonderful, understanding husband of 46 years. I always have to stop and think. I'm blessed with financial resources that I never dreamed would be mine. I've got friends, I'm in a position to really make things happen. Now I just have to hope I have enough time.
Well, that's why I'm really excited to work with you on your project and your blog, because when we reconnected, it was like at the tail end of COVID, right? Wasn't it? What?
I'm still trying to remember which came first. Did I contact you about your book and say, how's the book coming if you need help
No,
with?
I reached out to you.
That's right.
I emailed you to let you know, hey, I'm almost finished with the book. Just wanted to say thank you for everything that you've done, because you were the first person to take an interest in my writing, and financially at all. So I reached out to you to let you know it was done, and then you're like, I have breast cancer. And I was like,
well, I don't think it went quite like
yeah, well,
Well, I don't remember how long it was. I just remember at some point, because I don't remember exactly when you contacted me. I remember that I didn't start. I wrote what I thought was going to be another freaking book. Oh, dear God. I was calling it my cancer memoir. And I didn't start it till a year after. It was exactly a year after I'd been diagnosed.
Yes.
So a year went by, treatment, and then I started writing it, and that took, I don't know. Well, I finished it around the end of treatment, so the writing of it probably took 7 months. And then I didn't know what I was going to do with it, and I was already sick of it. So I just thought, someone else needs to read this, somebody I really know and trust, and I thought of you. And I remember I got in touch with you, and I said, okay, what do you charge? I need an editor.
Well, that was the beginning. That's when the seed was planted for me that your writing needs to be out in the world. Because when I started reading that, it's like you're dealing with breast cancer, and just the horrible stuff you had to go through with the chemo and the nausea and the can't sleep and the can't eat and you feel like crap every day. And every other line, like you're navigating these terrible, terrible, terrible experiences. And at the end of every paragraph, you made me laugh. And I'm like, how can you introduce like such humor and wit into this type of situation? I'm like, everybody will benefit from reading this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we have to figure out how to package Jean and get her out in the world. And that was the inception of it.
But I'd already decided I was done with being out in the world.
Yeah.
And Derek is like, Jean, you got to be doing this. Jean, you got to be doing that. Oh, there's people out there that need to hear your voice. Yeah. And I was going like, I need to be sharing my voice. I've done that for 30 years and everyone's sick of listening to me. I'm done. Yeah. I wasn't easy to persuade.
No. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of talking. But yeah, it was just there was such a level of like candor, and it was witty, and it was humorous, and it was like it pulled me in. It was incredibly well written. I know it's not going to turn into a book per se. It's going to be out in the world in a different form.
It's going to be in like short bursts, There's like the whole chronology because I was keeping my friends and family in touch like they actually cared. Well, it was the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I was writing like this email saga that was the chronology. Hi guys, second infusion day, that kind of thing, and like my reactions to it. But as I went, I just needed to like rant and vent and get some crap off my chest. So whenever I felt the urge to do that, I'd kind of like interrupt the whole chronology and do like my 2-page rant or something. Or if I figured something out and thought it was worth, 2 pages by itself. So that's what I did. And, when I was done with it, it was just like not in any format that I could see that was useful at all. I didn't want to do a cover page. I didn't want an illustration. God knows I didn't want photos. Oh my God. The number of times my treatment team, I'd complain about some complications, some infections, some abscess. Sorry to gross you out, people. And they'd be like, send me a photo. So I'd be like, okay, I'll send you a photo. And then my writer's mind would go, this might be useful. Maybe these are going to be in my book. I'm still deleting those goddamn things off my phone. Every once in a while, I'll see something on my phone and go, what is that with all the spots and the funny looking, oh my God, that's my incision. So, delete, trash. So, it was painful. It was more painful in a different way than anything else I'd ever written. But, I don't even know that I would have done it if I hadn't been diagnosed and treated during COVID. But it was like, no one was going to come visit me. And I think there was a part of me that refused to accept the fact, no matter how many times I told myself, Gene, nobody gives a crap. You don't have children. You've got a husband. He's taking good care of you. You don't have brothers and sisters. How many people? It's COVID. Everybody is immersed in their own personal tragedies. Who the hell cares? But I think I refused to give in to that. And that was why I wrote the fucking emails, every week, every 2 weeks, whatever. You may not want to read it, but by God, I'm writing it.
Right.
Back to that old grab them by the balls and make them listen. Well, even though Derek and I have not yet exhausted all the things that we want to talk about, we're going to take a break right here. We've gone a little bit over. We feel like we have put together enough material for an excellent podcast. And I just want to remind you folks that we are in a different location. Shout out to our wonderful fiscal sponsorship partner, the Awakenings Organization, the Awakenings Gallery, Laura Kinter, Awakenings Executive Director, and all the artists and writers and dreamers and healers who collaborated to put together this incredible space that has been made available to us today. There's other things to talk about. Maybe now is not the time to do it, but I'm going to let Derek tell you a few of the things that we've been working on in the past month.
So very soon, very, very, very soon, the Shame on You podcast is going to be available. We're going to have this on every single social media platform. We're going to have a subscription program up and running. Our website's going to be up and running. If I know you personally and I find out that you didn't sign up for the subscription program, we're going to have a problem. I will find you. I will get you. So just sign up.
Thank you, Derek.